Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the Finance and Governance Committee to order for May 23, 2013. And Madam Clerk, roll call and posting of the agenda.
Member Tehran,
Here.
Chair Zaragoza.
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on the City Hall Bulletin Board on May 16th, 2023.
Thank you. And please join me to salute our flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is item B, items not on the agenda. And I understand that we have Mr. Douglas Partello, virtual, or is he in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, Doug Portello is virtual.
Okay.
Doug, please press *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chair and member, staff, and the public. The water increase rate was passed, which I think none of us had any doubt that that wouldn't pass. And it was rather interesting, that process, that we were told how important having clean water is. Well, I think we know that. I had some questions that I raised at the initial agenda item. The answer was unresponsive in terms of the Procter & Gamble rate, but on the second agenda item, when it was brought before the public, it was answered better. Not good, but better. So that was good. That was an improvement. So I do have some questions still. I know we're going to get our water rate increased, but it's not about whether we know that water is important or the quality of water, or whether third world countries' water delivery system is poorer than ours. So from the 2010 water bond of $120 million, which was renegotiated, I believe, in 2014, why was an auditorium built at the AWPF with some of the money instead of the intended purpose, building ASR wells? And how much was spent on this auditorium? I had heard a figure of $22 million. What is the annual debt service the ratepayers of potable water are paying for the AWPF? What percentage are they paying of the total debt service? Third question, what is the annual cost, both fixed and variable, for the production of non-potable water for each of the last 5 years? Question 4, how much revenue is generated in user fees from the users of recycled water in each of the last 5 years? Question 5, how many acre-feet of water is recycled water produced each year for the last 5 years? Question 6, what is the current timeline for completion of the ASR wells for 3 skids? That's 7,000 acre-feet per skid of annual production of recycled water. Question 7, what are residential customers paying per acre foot, and how much are the commercial users paying per acre foot? Question 8, how does the city propose to claim the water
30
credits
seconds.
for supplying recycled water? So we got some answers on the Procter & Gamble, but I'd also like to know the commercial account per acre foot cost compared to other commercial users, because my understanding is Procter & Gamble is the only unblended water. I bring this before the Finance and Governance Committee because these are matters of money and the handling of our money for the utility funds, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, any additional speakers, either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. Our next item is item C1, consent. This is City Clerk Department. This approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Finance and Governance Committee approve the minutes of May 9th regular meeting as presented. Council members, any questions or concerns? No.
I will move to accept and Move to accept the minutes as presented.
I will second.
Okay, we got first and a second. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is D1 Reports, Public Works. This is the fiscal year 2023-24 Landscaping Maintenance District. Initiations of proceedings of a levy assessments, approval of consolidated engineering report, declaration of intention to levy assessments. Recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend to the City Council, acting as a legislative body of the City of Oxnard Landscape Maintenance Districts, LMDs, one, adopt a resolution of the City Council, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Oxnard, California, initiating proceedings to levy assessments against real property for fiscal year 2023-24 in connection with the city's landscape maintenance districts. And two, adopt a resolution of the City Council, City of Oxnard, California, approving the consolidated engineering's report regarding assessments against real property in fiscal year 23-24 in connection with the city's landscape maintenance districts. And three, adopt a resolution adopting the City Council of the City of Oxnard, California, declaring its intention to levy assessments against real property for fiscal year 23-24 in connection with the city's landscape district. And again, this was a video presented under Measure M, a pre-recorded item, and we do have our Public Works Director, Michael, if we have any, or do we have Steve? Whoever, anyway, so we have someone that might answer some questions. But I understand that we also have a speaker on this item, and this is Mr. Douglas Partello.
Doug Portello, please press *6 to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hi again, everyone. I have some questions about the handling of our LMDs in terms of the actual cost versus the administrative cost, and also some unfinished business as far as the reporting of prior years for our LMD administrative fee costs. So I brought this before the committees, I brought it before the City Council numerous times, that back in January of 2018, it was Bert Perillo and Oscar Madrigal that called for an agenda item to discuss the NBS 2016 portion of the audit for administrative fees. So I brought this to the attention several times why the public has not been able to see that portion of the audit, which the public, the residents of Oxnard, paid $25,000 for that audit, and it was much needed. And we've yet to see that portion. Now, Council Member Duran has stated that he's seen it, and there's nothing there. Well, again, I'm delighted to hear that. But don't you feel that the public should have an opportunity to see an audit that we paid for? Now, as we look at this current year, it looks like there's about $800,000 that's being paid to Oxnard staff to oversee the LMDs. Now, we're already paying a pretty hefty sum to NBS to do that very work. So my question is, why does it take additional staff hours resulting in a cost of $800,000 to do what? I mean, what exactly are those hours being spent on that we're paying an outside vendor to manage these districts? So it's just a big question there as far as the cost of these types of administrative costs, particularly when we still have many unanswered questions about the cost from prior years. We also have some rather interesting accounting as far as the administrative costs that were budgeted from the prior year, and that budget went over. So with public information
30
requests,
seconds.
was actually able to see that over 50% of the budgeted costs, they put it in the utility line item. and I guess just to hide that overage for administrative costs. So, we have to have better accountability. We have to have better transparency. And I think it starts with you guys voting again to make an agenda item for the secret portion of the 2016 LMD audit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, on the audit report, City Attorney, excuse me, what response do we have then? Then we can have staff talk about the audit cost, the staff cost.
So as far as the 2018 reference, that question's been asked and answered numerous times. It was the subject of closed session discussions. It's closed session communication.
Yes, it was closed session item, okay. And also the admin cost or staff cost, that, can somebody share something about that, please?
Good evening, members of the committee, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Eric Story. I am your Special Districts Manager. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this item. So the caller asked about administrative expenses as it relates to staffing plus administrative costs for NBS, which is a consultant. So as we've prepared this budget, what we've done at the staff level is listen to our communities, right? Through the use of Oxnard 311, through the use of emails, phone calls, and walk-ins, the community has told us exactly what they want. They want trees trimmed, they want their sidewalks repaired, they like maintenance services provided at certain levels and frequencies. The administrative costs are to ensure that we have agreements in place. We have staffing that inspect what we expect of our contractors, as well as answer and address and work with our community to understand their wants and needs. Now, at the same time, there are specialized functions of this annual process that staff are not equipped to do. The annual levy process, they working with the county. In this instance, that's why we rely on NBS as our consultant for these services.
Okay. And my understanding, of course, those items or landscaping maintenance has been allowed through the property owners and the developers from the beginning. The people, when they bought those properties, probably had to sign up and knew that that happened many, many years ago when they, correct?
That is correct. When you sign the packet of paper, when you purchase a house or a condo, there is disclosures in there.
There's the closures, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, council members, any questions on this?
Excuse me,
Excuse
Mayor.
me, do I have any additional speakers? I'm sorry.
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. Council members? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Story, for that initial information. If you could just elaborate a little bit more on the distinction between what our consultant does versus what our staff does for LMDs specifically.
Yes, for the LMDs, we have various city staff positions allocated. One is a project manager, and two are landscape inspectors or maintenance specialists, seniors who are physically on site daily, inspecting what we expect of our contractors. They're identifying maintenance and repair items that we need to address. They're working with residents on site for their concerns or otherwise. And regarding NBS and this consultant, there are things like prepayment of property taxes when you're getting ready to sell or purchase a house. That staff, we don't have that specialized experience or knowledge on how to do. There are also processes with the county in terms of the annual levy submission that, again, staff, we don't have that experience in being able to do. So we rely on them as subject matter experts in order to process this accurately and in a timely manner.
All right, thank you for that distinction. And I know that the LMDs differ across the city in the amount that they get in their special LMD tax or whatever the official title is for that. And I understand that there are a number of LMDs that didn't have an escalator built into them at their inception. So just some, hypothetical numbers. If we had a neighborhood that was built with an LMD in 1987 and they were paying $88 at that time with no escalator built in, $88 a year for in 1987 dollars is a lot different than $88 in 2023. And so, is that correct that we have some LMDs in that situation?
We do, yes. There are roughly 7 LMDs, I believe, that do not have a built-in escalator or annual inflator as part of their formation documents.
Okay. So that being said, whatever they can get for their assessment per year is kind of what's available to them, correct?
So their funding sources include their annual assessment. If there are any available funds in the reserve or their fund balance, that can be applied or used as well. The LMDs do get general benefit contribution, so that is funding from a non-assessment funding source. So in this instance, the general fund, and then grants as well, but special districts team has not applied for grants for the LMD. So you really have their annual assessment or levy, reserves, as well as general benefit contribution as funding sources.
Okay. And if we have LMDs or a specific LMD that hits the threshold or the maximum of what their current funding sources allow, what's available to them? I mean, what is this? This is the level of service you're going to be able to get? Is that correct?
So running a balanced budget is important. So we might want to make sure that expenses meet revenues. Mm-hmm. So in the instances, in this example, where a district may not be able to meet their anticipated or expected expenses, what staff would do is look at ways to reduce expenses. Now that could happen in terms of reducing of service levels, which would save the district money. It could be reduced on-call services. So maybe this year we won't take care of this item or that item. Those are the primary means that we start with. From there is opportunities for these districts or for a district to work through the Proposition 218 process, by which they can vote for themselves to increase their annual assessment or special tax.
Okay. And I'm glad that those options have been laid out for folks so they understand that if they live in an LMD in a landscape maintenance district, which is a deprecated type of district that we have, I don't think we're doing that anymore in the state of California, it sounds like, or at least not in Oxnard. Those are some options they have if the level of service they desire is higher than what could currently be offered by their sources of revenue. So, all right, thank you for pointing that out. My last question, the speaker did refer to some costs that were placed into a utility line item. That's something that's a little new to me. Do we have any information about that, or is that something we can look into for kind of further elaboration?
Council member, we will have to understand the topic better in order to answer it, but as soon as we're done, we'll make sure to do some research on this item. Okay, I appreciate that, and we can have that ready as a response by the time this comes to council. So, thank you.
Mr. Story, on the general benefits, that this LMD financing does not cover the general benefits, is that correct?
So currently, yes, the LMDs do receive general benefit, and in this budget is proposed to include additional general benefit. I'm sorry, maybe Mr. Mayor, can you ask the question?
No, well, no, because the LMD has so much funding, right? And then, but if there's any general benefit to that LMD, that would be covered by the general fund.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the question, if I'm understanding correctly, is where is the funding source for the general benefit contribution?
Yes.
Correct. So it is proposed to come from the general fund this year, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That was my question, and I understand what the speaker said and what his concerns are, but based on the staff report, and I'm just going to read straight from the staff report, just for the general public, it states that for fiscal year 23-24, the preliminary total projected expenditures for the LMDs is 3.8 million. And it's actually almost 3.9, but this will be funded through $683,000 in 2023-24 real property assessments, 2.8 million in existing fund in the LMD accounts, 17,151 from interest income, a general benefit, which I believe the mayor was talking about,
That's right.
contribution of 297,000 from the general fund, and a subsidy from the general fund of 63,970 for utility overages. So what this tells me is that these LMDs are really not sustainable. Would that be a true statement?
That's a very complex question. I'm going to call Mr. Wolf to
Mr.
help
Wolf can-
address.
Help us out. Thank you. Michael.
Good afternoon, Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works. It's actually a very relevant question, and very complex. The Streets and Highway Code section, which is the section that talks about landscape and lighting districts, is very specific about special versus general benefit. And so any assessment district that's a Streets and Highway Code section 1972 Act talks about you have to be able to assess the special benefit and not the general benefit. So all those districts were set up such that they were supposed to have a non-assessment funding source. So those are always going to be the case when you have LMDs, different than CFDs, different than maintenance assessment districts. So I think part of the question is, yes, if we want to continue to have LMDs, we will always have a general benefit contribution requirement per the governances. Whether or not we should, quote unquote, subsidize those is a different question. So I think that's part of your question about, in the future, should we have these subsidies? And the answer to that is that's a policy level question in terms of being able to fund these districts above and beyond what would be required as the general benefit contribution.
Right, and thank you for that answer, and I know it's very complex for you to answer these questions, but my point here was that, yes, we have these LMDs, and we do have members of our community that don't think that we are spending the LMD dollars properly, but my point was that we're giving general fund contributions also. So it's to our benefit to really, really stretch those LMD dollars. So that was sort of, what my point is. We're trying to be, at least I hope, very conservative when we're doing these estimates.
That's a good point.
And thank you for your answer.
You're welcome. Mayor, if I may go back to Councilmember Turan's question, because I think it's
Go ahead.
part of the question is about the commenter's questions about moving money around. So let me go backwards a little bit. The Streets and Highway Code section talks about how we're supposed to estimate next year's expenditure. So what we're talking about tonight is an estimate, not a guess. I mean, we're obviously using some data points, but it's still an estimate. So last year this time we were estimating what we were going to spend this fiscal year, and sometimes just like your own budget at home, you weren't planning on fixing a flat tire, or you weren't planning on having a guest stay over for multiple days and having to buy extra food, right? So sometimes those things come up, and moving money around in any one fiscal year is a budget adjustment that we do to cover those kinds of things. So we'll come back with some specifics, but moving money from one line item to another to pay some of those unforeseen or unestimated things is not uncommon. We do it all the time in our budgeting process, either at home or here at the city. So I think part of the answer is these are assessment dollars provided by the assessment district, could be paid for all the allowable expenditures that happen. If it doesn't happen in one line item, we could move that money to a separate line item for things that may come up that we didn't expect.
Councilmember. Okay.
No, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just along that train of thought, Mr. Wolf, you mentioned a very important phrase there about allowable expenses. So long as, I'm sure we'll get details based on what was mentioned in the comment, but so long as whatever that overage is, for example, if it was hypothetically, there was overage in utility costs that needed to be covered, if there was an allowable move of X line item to that line item to cover that cost, then that's what our staff would have done. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you and Mr. Story looking into that as well.
And thank you, Michael. Again, a budget is a roadmap, and I know we're gonna talk about our city budget today, and that happens too, a budget is a roadmap that has alternatives and options, for those budgets. That I think people should understand that.
Correct. And the good news is the LMD budgets, they're insulated. So it's not like that money goes and disappears. If it's not used in one fiscal year, it just goes back into their fund balance and can be used again in future fiscal years as either a levy credit or something else, another project, pay for more watering, those kinds of things. So it's all self-contained inside.
So they don't lose that money.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, no additional speakers on this item.
Mayor Zaragoza, right, we have no additional speakers for this item.
Council members, what's pleasure?
Well, I'll go ahead and move the recommended actions of 1, 2, and 3 for the city council.
I will second.
Second, okay, got a first and a second. Councilman Charan, please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you so much. Our next item is D2, this Public Works, is fiscal year 2023 special tax levy for community facility districts number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2000-3. Recommendation of the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council, acting as a legislative body for the Community Facilities District, CFD number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2003, 1, adopt a resolution setting a special tax rate for CFD number 1, Westport and Mandalay Bay for fiscal year 2023-24. 2, adopt a resolution setting a special tax rate for CFD number 2, Westport and Mandalay Bay fiscal year 23-24. 3, adopt a resolution setting a special tax rate for CFD number 3, Seabridge and Mandalay for fiscal year 23-24. 4, adopt a resolution setting a special rate CFD for number 4, Seabridge, Mandalay Bay, fiscal year 23-24. 5, adopt a resolution setting a special tax rate with CFD number 5, River Park for fiscal year 23-24. 6, adopt a resolution setting a special tax rate for CFD 2000-3, Oxnard Boulevard Highway 101 interchange for fiscal year 23-24. And 7, authorize the Public Works Director to designee to execute an agreement for billing direct assessments with Ventura County Auditor Controller to provide the services of placement of direct assessment on the Ventura County Tax Board. And of course, tax roll, Again, this is under Measure M as a pre-recorded item, and we have Mr. Michael Wolf for any questions. And we do have a speaker on this item, is Ty Hartley for D2.
Mayor Zaragoza, Ty Hartley is not available virtually or in person at this time.
Any additional speakers virtually or in person here?
No, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item at this time.
So council members, I think you had a question on this item. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'm not going to ask staff to summarize this one because it's multiple CFDs and multiple geographical areas throughout the city. So I'm just going to dive into some questions regarding CFD 5, which falls into the district that I oversee. We had a number of emails come in, and I had folks speak to me directly as well as to staff directly at the last River Park Neighborhood Council meeting. And so I just wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge and address those requests that came in. The first one is regarding the Oxnard Police Department storefront that is at the collection. And I'm hoping that staff can first explain what the storefront is, how that operates, how it serves that area. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about the requests on that one.
Assistant Chief Diane, help.
Thank you very much, Assistant Chief Morehouse with the Police Department. And I also have District Commander Lewis MacArthur here as well. The storefront is located in the collection property, and it's a place where officers can go and do their reports. They can hold community meetings. They can conduct some of their staff work. It's also where we use it as a base for any operations that may be happening either in River Park or the collection or the north end of Oxnard.
All right, thank you very much. And can you share a little bit about how the CFD5 detail that is enhanced police services in River Park, how they utilize the storefront?
Yes, so they can base out of there, they can use it to do their reports, they can use it to take their lunch breaks, they can use it to use the restroom. If they're working bike patrol, they can park their police unit there, they can change into their uniforms there, and they can also meet with community members there if needed.
Okay, so it sounds like it serves a number of administrative and operational functions as far as, okay.
Councilmember Connect, quick question.
Yes.
Is that open 7 days a week?
It is not open and staffed 7 days a week. When an officer is there, they unlock it and they're in the storefront.
But they're available there for any concerns there for?
They're available there, yes, but it is not staffed 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think that's a similar operation to what we have with other storefronts that we've held throughout the city over the years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so that being said, looking at some of the items pertaining to the storefront within CFD5, can we talk a little bit about the lease for the storefront and our agreement with the collection on that?
Yes, I'm actually going to call up Commander MacArthur with that because he works with the collection on the lease of that property.
Thank you.
Commander MacArthur?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, council members. So we have an understanding with the collection management where we utilize the storefront free of charge to occupy that space.
Okay.
Well, that's significant. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, you know, are there other ancillary costs that we incur by using the storefront?
Yeah, there are operational costs, including we pay for internet telephone service there. We pay for an alarm service as well. And we pay Southern California Edison for electricity service. All in all, it comes to about $970 a month for the operational costs of the storefront.
All right. And for the operations of the storefront, while it's geographically located in River Park and we have intuitively our CFD5 detail would be able to utilize that space, I know they're only there X number of days out of the week, you know, as what the CFD will support. During the rest of the week, are other officers able to use the storefront if they're in the North Oxnard area or in those beats or from anywhere in the city?
Yeah, that's correct. And as you know, the North District has grown quite a bit. So the patrol officers that we have working that part of the city quite readily utilize the storefront as opposed to coming to our downtown police station. They do a lot of their administrative work there out of the storefront. So that's used quite readily by our patrol fleet.
Okay, I appreciate that. And, you know, I do want to point out that folks from the collection, representatives of the property itself, have acknowledged the benefit that they see in having the collection, or excuse me, the storefront there at the collection. And while the CFD5 detail is assigned to the neighborhood, do we have existing or planned resources for the collection for Oxnard PD that might be able to use that storefront as well?
We do. We're actually, I'm actually in direct communication with the general management there of the collection. And here shortly, they've agreed to a cost-sharing plan with us, a 75-25 cost-sharing where we are going to bring before council for consideration to have a full-time police officer out of the collection that will be working potentially Thursday through Sunday, a 40-hour work week. So they'll be at the collection full-time, and that means they'll be utilizing the storefront as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. My last question for the storefront. If we have the CFD5 detail who would naturally utilize that most often, but we also have the accessibility and ability of our other officers outside of River Park who utilize it, you know, looking at the minimal costs that we have for that place, I want to thank the collection and for you, Commander MacArthur, for agreeing or coming up with an agreement that allows us to utilize it at virtually no cost for a lease. Whatever our operational costs are for utilities or other items that are able to have that place be functional, if we have some kind of general use there and a CFD use, I'm hoping that staff can look at the possibility and can bring it back to us of either one, a share of cost where we have the CFD pay a proportion of what typically they would utilize that space for the CFD to be served, and then what the general fund would, or our police budget would look at. Or if you can look at what the cost would be to absorb that out of the general fund budget. So I'd appreciate if we could bring that information back.
Certainly, Councilman, we can do that.
But but that's an excellent, for the combination of helping out, to really patrol the collection, 'cause it's a big, big area, and there's a lot of traffic and lots of people walking up and down the street, so I think that's gonna be a benefit to the entire community for that matter.
Correct, Mayor. And it's hard to separate what happens at the collection, because a lot of what happens at the collection spills into the neighborhood, so.
That's right.
It's a tremendous benefit having an officer there at the collection. And as you mentioned, Councilmember Turan, our beat officers utilize the storefront quite a bit, and now the spillover with the River Park enhanced services, and now with the collection officer as well. So we're all equally sharing that storefront, but we'll certainly look into those operational costs.
It's a partnership between the collections and the River Park.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah, they're all part of the community, for sure.
That's
and It's
right.
a community
That's-
facilities
yeah, that's
district.
great.
Keeping in mind that the collection as an entity also does pay into the CFD. And I believe for a number of years before the residential was built, we're already paying into it, even though historically at the recession when nothing was being built at the collection, when things were delayed, they still had to pay into it. And so I hope that residents can understand and recognize that all of the residents and business partners there in the River Park area do pay into the CFD. So I appreciate their willingness to house a storefront, because geographically we would have officers who need to travel all the way back to the station or to some other storefront to take care of their administrative duties or take a break or whatever they're going to do.
Correct. It's best of utilization of time as well. And CFD 5, that neighborhood has paid for a lot of the equipment. We have bicycles, for example, and other equipment that is stored at the storefront, as opposed to actually either paying for storage to keep some of that equipment. So that's a benefit directly to the neighborhood as well.
That's excellent. That's great.
Great. And can I have another?
Go ahead.
All right. So since we have our commander in Oxnard PD up here already, so we received other emails, and I did have communication regarding the level of service that the CFD 5 detail would get for River Park. And are you able to summarize either OPD or our special district staff just what we'd be looking at this year for level of service, just so it's stated for the public?
Sure, and just to clarify, when we talk about enhanced police services for River Park, enhanced means just that. It means in addition to increase of police services. That's not to take away from the regular patrols that we provide to that neighborhood.
Oh, good.
Through our general fund, for example, or the police budget. So what we do currently right now is we provide extra patrols for the River Park residents Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We provide coverage for them. It's a two-man unit that patrols the neighborhood, and that limits the response time, so we're quickly able to respond to any calls for service that are generated for that neighborhood. We're able to address quality of life issues specifically to that neighborhood. And we hope to continue that with the funding that we have.
All right, thank you. And I hope that the residents of River Park and the general public all recognize that the enhanced service is paid for by the residents through this special tax that they pay into the CFD, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not just folks are doing it, it's not like OPD's doing it because River Park, just getting extra services. There is actually residents and businesses paying for that through this process. So thank you for clarifying that. So that being said, at the neighborhood council meeting, it was mentioned that given the current budget for the extra detail, or excuse me, enhanced services through the police department, while the figure, the amount will remain the same, that does have to incur a reduction in service for this coming fiscal year, correct?
There may be some, yes. We have to make some adjustments, correct.
Okay. And so we did have folks email about that and request that we restore it to what the previous level of service is. And do we have any kind of estimate on what that might look like if that were something that we would look at?
Yeah, we're looking, conservatively, we're looking to increase our budget currently from $25,000 to $45,000 to continue the level of service. And that's taken under consideration the negotiated pay increase for police officers, for example, that we've got to take that into account, that is going to cost just that much more to be able to provide the enhanced services to that neighborhood to the level that it currently is at now.
Okay.
But I know that some residents want additional coverage. For example, as I mentioned, we currently provide coverage for enhanced services there 3 days a week, and there are some residents that want additional coverage up to 5 or even 7 days a week. So we have to explore those.
And that's why I was asking the question, my apologies, because, that's going to increase the patrolling and the enhanced work, that the police are doing.
Correct. So we're looking to have those conversations here with that neighborhood to see concretely what it is that they want to see and present to them a cost figure so they can take that under consideration, what that means.
Okay, I appreciate you all looking into that and getting us some conservative figures on that because number one, I have to give a lot of credit to staff from special districts and Oxnard PD and Public Works for engaging the River Park community this year in a series of budget workshops to start introducing and formulating what they would like to see in this year's budget that we have before us right now. But now with us being here at the committee level and sending this forward to the council in a couple of weeks, I don't feel completely confident or comfortable saying, hey, let's go ahead and adjust 5 figures within the budget to bring it up to that level that they're asking for. I understand, respect, and appreciate what they're asking for, but at this point in time, with the time window we have, this type of adjustment should go to the neighborhood council or to the River Park residents for vetting, for them to say, hey, if you'd like this level of service, here's the amount we need to take from somewhere else, or the amount we'd need you all to decide, would you like to increase your assessment to cover this extra cost? So given our time frame now, I'm going to ask that we move forward as is, if my member colleagues would agree, just as far as the requests around the enhanced police services, simply because of the time constraints. And I would really like the community to weigh in on this, knowing that, again, it is a budget, a roadmap, as the mayor has mentioned, and we can monitor the services and the service level in the new fiscal year. If folks feel very strongly about it, we can revisit it. And when the series of workshops, I hope will be repeated in the new fiscal year, happen again, folks can really start advocating for that. And I think this is a really great example of folks getting engaged in that process and now realizing what types of service they'd like to see, and now knowing when this time comes around again, that they can start advocating for that. So that's my response to those messages, and I do appreciate folks reaching out on that.
And staff's listening to that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commander.
Thank you, Commander.
Okay. Well, we had item number 2 here that was a concern that revenue generated from the park reservation, the River Park, Rio Vista School, Ballfield gym be applied to the CFD number 5. Terrell, can you share some information on item number 2 that was shared by the resident here?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Terrell Harrison, Cultural and Community Services Director.
I thought you were on vacation.
You could send me out.
The city manager brought you back.
Yes.
No.
Okay. What the question was
the monies generated from that, that should be applied to the CFD 5.
Yes. So, Mr. Mayor, we take reservations revenue from one area, and that is for soccer. We do not take reservations for the gymnasium. We generate, the fees that we generate do not cover our program costs. For example, in 2018, we took in $6,637.50 in reservation revenue, and our operating costs were $30,395.71.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Is this the graphic that was shared at the neighborhood council meeting, that table?
Correct.
We have that queued up if you'd like to have that as a visual for the public.
Sure.
if Diego can bring that up.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Go ahead, Terrell.
Go ahead.
So as you can see, it fluctuates, but our revenue is from the fields is right there in the green. And what it costs to operate all of our programs, and from the revenue that we take in from reservations, you could see what, in red, what is the deficit.
Okay, so there
So,
was,
I'm sorry, Mr.
no,
Mayor.
I'm sorry, so was that a negative in 2020 or what?
Correct. It's
Okay.
a negative. It's a negative
Oh, all
across
the way
the
through,
board.
all the way through.
Yes,
Okay.
our youth programs are subsidized.
Okay.
By the general fund.
Okay. The next item I had here is number 3. It says confirm that the current levy of $721,765 is compiled of what? Maybe Mr. Thank you. Number 3, the $721,765 is compiled of what? You know.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, council. So the special tax levy credit is one of two things. It can either be used to reduce their special tax, or in the instance where they do not have that ability, they can use that special tax as a funding source. So essentially,
Okay.
every year, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have Mr. Miller explain this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, he was on track there. Essentially, every year, if the recommended budget for maintenance services within the district exceed the total expenses exceed the available revenues, the difference between expenses and revenues can be considered a levy credit. So rather than adjust the special tax to fully 100% cover the budgeted expenses, money from the fund balance can be used in the form of a levy credit to cover those additional costs.
Okay, so it's really a credit to cover those items then?
Correct.
Any overage?
So specifically in regard to that question, what would be covered by those expenses?
Yeah,
It would be any and all expenses for services that are rendered and above and beyond the revenues generated from the district.
So, right, okay, good, thank you. Do you want to take number 4?
Just on another item here, I don't know if our special district staff or our cultural community services folks or both would like to just talk a little bit about the ball fields specifically, explaining kind of the agreement that we have in place for that, and then the share of costs we have with the school district on some of those items that have to do with that area.
This one might be a team effort here.
Sure.
This is what they were talking about.
So Councilman, I could speak to the gym directly. And then I will turn over the ball fields to my colleague. The gymnasium, we utilize the gymnasium, Cultural Community Services, to run our youth basketball programs. We don't take reservations on there. Our agreement with the school district is when the gym needs to be resurfaced, the school district pays for half, and the city of Oxnard pays for half. And that half that we do pay for comes out of general fund.
Okay, so no CFD money is used for the maintenance of the gym, is that correct?
No.
Okay, and do we make any revenue on reservations for the gym? Or are there reservations for the gym?
Again, Councilman, there are no reservations for the gymnasium. We use them for our programming.
Okay, and is it essentially for the public, is there like an open gym time or time when the River Park residents or anyone can utilize that space?
Yes, we've had a number of open gym programs such as volleyball. We'll have open gym basketball, but the thing that we have in there mostly are our league, and we've had adult league basketball in there, but the majority of programs that we had in there are our youth basketball programs, which are played throughout the city, Powell Gymnasium, the El Rio Gymnasium that we're speaking of, and as well as the Colonia Gymnasium.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear we're providing services for our youth, geographically diverse services, but you know, the northern part certainly deserves to have access to those services also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then Mr. Miller.
Do we have any speakers? Yes, we
Oh,
do.
we actually have Mr. Miller who was going to refer.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Second half of that
Finish
question.
off. Go, I'm sorry.
In regards to the fields, the soccer fields behind Del Mar and the softball fields behind Del Mar and the soccer fields behind Rio Vista and the baseball fields behind Rio Vista are rented out, or excuse me, they're not rented out, are programmed by local softball and Little League groups that use those throughout the softball and baseball season, and then city soccer programs are used on those fields during the city soccer season as well. The CFD does pay to maintain those fields, and they also do pay for the utility expense of maintaining those fields.
All right, and the River Park residents, have brought up a number of, really important questions about that agreement, and that is agreement with the school district, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit about that and just address some of the most common questions that come up about that?
So there is a joint use agreement with the school district and the city for programming for youth sports. The youth sport community was very vocal when the River Park development was being planned and put together back in the 2004, 2005, 2006 timeframe. And as a part of the construction of those schools, it was argued that in order to provide youth sports to the community, especially on that side of town, that those softball and baseball programs should have access to those fields when they were constructed. As a as a part of that joint use agreement, in order to have access to the fields, the school district successfully argued that the CFD and the city should maintain them, or sports field maintenance is a little bit higher standard than what they would normally maintain for school district facilities. And so it was agreed at that time to have the CFD pay to maintain those fields for sports usage, as that was considered a benefit above and beyond what you would normally see from just general school district usage, or limited to students for the school districts.
Great. Go ahead.
Thank you. And the last thing, and I'm not sure if this would be you all or rec, there was a mention about the snack bar being paid for by the CFD. Do we have any additional information about that? I see the screenshot we received was from March of 2021 with County of Ventura permits being paid for by the CFD. I mean, that was just a couple weeks after I came on council, so it's the first I've seen this, but I don't see anything for 2022 or 23. But if you could talk a little bit about the snack bar and the questions about that.
For 2022, I believe the permit fees were waived because of COVID. I'd have to go back and double check, but I believe there was a year in which they were waived, which is why they may not show up on the financial report. But the health permits from the county to operate those snack bars were charged to the district for this past year, correct?
For this year, 2023?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is something from my understanding has been something that has been taking place for a number of years before I've been with the city as well.
Okay. That's something I would certainly like to investigate a little bit more, just because the snack bar being utilized for games and sales, I'm imagining the league probably staffs it and does the upkeep similar to our other snack bars we have throughout the city. I'd like to have a little bit more information on that between now and the next time this comes before the council, just so we can make sure that what we're doing is going to be an appropriate expense that's coming out of the CFD for the snack bar. So if that's the only thing that's coming out of the snack bar, I think that's an easy conversation, but I'd just like to request that.
Just to provide a little bit more information on that, the entirety for snack bar expenses currently on an annual basis are those permit fees, utilities, and essentially a cleaning that happens annually. There is maintenance that has to happen on the building occasionally, but there is nothing that's been done recently within the last few years that have been planned. So at this time, those are the only expenses, but those can easily be discussed with the leagues.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No? Yeah. Okay, Madam Clerk, any speakers on this item, virtually or here?
Yes, Mayor Zaragoza, we have one speaker with phone number ending in 4800. Please press *6 to unmute and introduce yourself if you like. and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Henry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Well, it seems like we really need to get someone who really has common sense right now inside this building that we're talking about right now. Okay. For years now, everybody's property taxes have been going in District 1. Okay. Whoever's the council member in District 1 needs to start holding park functions. That way they understand that they're in charge of their own parks. Now, I just got done going in the restroom behind Channel Islands High School because there hasn't been a restroom at that park for almost 5 years now. Okay? Channel Islands High School, the basketball gym inside, it's falling apart. I'm just so confused of how you guys prospect and put money in certain districts when it has no return. You guys are talking about a return right now. What I would be talking about if I was mayor, I'd be talking to my council members, making sure that they're holding park functions. Because I can't be giving you my city budget because there's a lot of things inside the city that isn't righteous at all. And I don't understand where you guys look at the city as it being ranked 8th in California. And you guys are talking about Forest River Park, where we all know houses at Forest River Park are over $900,000. Okay? So now you're going to explain to us in the city of Oxnard that don't live in District 1 why they keep getting more funds for their parks, et cetera, et cetera. We have a Blackstock Park that hasn't had a Little League there. And you wonder why, right? Because whoever's running that district isn't even involved in that park. I mean, you guys got to start making some sense because these houses, these prices, everything is only detrimental to making sure that nobody has money at the end of the day. And nobody's getting paid no $30 or $40 an hour in Oxnard. There's no jobs like that, period. Okay? So let's be fair, okay? Let's make sense now. If our generation, right, between 45 and under want to buy a house in Oxnard, they're not. And if we want to, it's not going to be next to these parks that are run down. I mean, they're not even brand new barbecue pits. I mean, like I said, all you guys got to do is just hold park functions. If I was a mayor, I wouldn't even give you any money for your park. Make money for your park first. Make 80 to 90%, and then I'll give you 10% of the money. But at the end of the day, you guys are building a new high school, and you guys have an old high school named Channel Islands High School that needs to be rebuilt already, okay? So you guys need to stop doing
30
whatever you guys are doing and
seconds.
start doing it right. Because the Oxnard is failing because nobody's doing their job right. And we need a younger, enthused mayor, someone that can go out here in the streets and cares about Savior's Road, okay? Because we all know everybody goes to sleep at night, and we all know that nobody cares because it shows. All I'm trying to say is that I'm tired of everybody's money going to one district, and at the end of the day, we're like putting more money in the same district. It makes no sense. Honestly, it makes none. Williams School. Oh my.
Thank you so much. Thank you. But we're talking about CFDs today, you know, and staff has heard about those restrooms behind Channel Islands. They're working on it. But the item today is CFDs, you know. Thank you so much.
Mayor, we
Madam
have
Clerk?
one additional speaker, Doug Portello. Doug, please press star 6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Portello, you're on.
Doug Portello, can you press star 6 to unmute?
We have, no, we haven't the.
He did raise his hand.
No, we have him on F8, a D8, but, excuse me. Well, we'll pick him up later then. Well, Mr. City, okay. Any additional speakers on this item?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, go ahead. Councilman Turan.
Thank you. I apologize. I think I might have overlapped with your question here regarding the levy credit. I'm hoping that our special district staff can speak to that just a little bit, just for the public record. Confirm what the current levy credit of $721,765 is compiled of, or what it comprises.
So I can get a little bit more specific than the note that I gave earlier. That $721,000 number is comprised of a wide variety of services. There's nothing specific that it actually applies to. So say there's 50 cents of a dollar in here that's going to be going to tree trimming. I cannot specifically say that XYZ services are included within that levy credit, but the cumulative total of the services and maintenance services planned for the district come up to a certain budgeted amount, and the expected revenues are $721,000 below that expected expense amount. So in terms of services that are provided, we, just to give an example, we're talking landscape maintenance for the entire district, tree trimming, things along the lines of like fence repair, any of the on-call services, electrical systems, things along those lines. That is all covered by a portion of that levy credit.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have items 1 through 6 for adoption of resolutions, and then number 7, authorizing the PW director to designate to execute those billings with the tax collector. What's the pleasure?
Before we proceed, Mayor, I do want to thank staff and my colleagues up here for allowing me to almost dominate the conversation here on this item, because it's
important,
multiple CFDs, and
Yeah.
so I just want to
Absolutely.
make the offer if there were any questions about CFDs 1, 2, 3, 4, or 2000-3. I don't have any, so.
No, it's important. I think those items are really extremely important, and you have some questions, and they were answered. And Councilmember.
Thank
So
you.
we need a motion on this item?
I will go ahead and make the motion that's recommended here to send this to council.
I will second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. Our next item is item D3, and this is Public Works Fiscal Year 2022-23 Budget Appropriation for Community Facility District Number 7, the Wagon Wheel. Recommendations that Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council approve a fiscal year 22-23 budget appropriation from the available fund balance in the amount of $100,399 for Special District Fund 120 for reimbursement of fiscal year 2022-23, and authorize a developer reimbursement from the Wagon Wheel Community Facilities District. And this, again, was presented under Measure M. And we do have our, go ahead. Any additional questions of this young man?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller. The staff report and the presentation, I appreciate you all putting work into that. This one's a little different from the previous item. I'm just hoping you could explain a little bit for the public and for the record just what's in front of us here.
Absolutely, and I apologize for not introducing myself earlier to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
I'm a project manager for the Special Districts Division, and in specific for this item, this is the authorization of a reimbursement, or excuse me, a budget adjustment in order to fund a reimbursement request to the master HOA and developer of the Wagon Wheel neighborhood. The way that this CFD is set up is that the master HOA is responsible for maintaining landscape improvements within the district. And for the first 24 months after the district was formed and the master HOA was to maintain these areas, the developer was to forward or advance the funding necessary to maintain these improvements. At the end of that 24-month period, the developer is entitled to request reimbursements for those expenses. And this would be essentially the first installment of reimbursement requests from the developer for those purposes.
And by the way, that's a beautiful district too. It's really come pretty good, you know, so.
It's in progress. It's definitely
In
coming
progress,
along.
right. Doing a good job, yeah. So, Madam Clerk, any speakers on this item, either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have Doug Portello. He has his hand up, so I'm not sure if, because he did sign up for item D8. So do you want to call him
Mr.
for this
Portela,
one?
do you want to go 8, or are you speaking on this item?
Doug Portello, do you want to speak on this item? Please press
Or
star
number 8,
6
then.
to unmute.
Okay, so. Okay, we'll continue then. Okay, council members, we need a motion on this item.
I will move the recommended action.
Okay,
will
motion
second.
by Basua, second by Zaragoza. Please vote.
Mayor, to confirm, we have a motion by Councilmember Basua and a second by
By
Chair Zaragoza.
You're right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. Our next item is item D4. This is Information Technology Department, and the subject is renewal of the purchase order 8022 with CompuWave Incorporated for the purchase of information technology goods. Recommendation of the Finance Governance Committee recommended the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to renew a purchase order 8022 for information technology goods and services with CompuWave Incorporated pursuant to a piggyback agreement with the County of Ventura, contract number 8926, for an additional 2-year term expiring June 30th, 2025, and increasing not to exceed the amount from $1,600,000 to $2,600,000. And this, again, was a pre-recorded item or presentation, and we do have Helen Miller. Helen? Council members, any questions on this item? Or do we have any speakers on this item?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, go ahead, Council member.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Just real briefly, I'm hoping that maybe you can touch on a little bit about, with the agreement in front of us, what have we been able to accomplish thus far in our devices and our computers that we have throughout the city?
Yes, certainly. Hello, my name is Helen Miller. I'm the CIO, and good evening. This is a PO that has been in existence for several years, and it's expiring, and we're here for a 2-year renewal. And we've used this PO to purchase a significant volume of equipment across the city, and this is equipment that everyone uses in the city to do a job that is relying upon technology. And that includes desktop computers, laptops, the automagical stuff in the back end that people don't see, like servers and storage, that is essential for those systems to work. And we've managed to take a fleet that just 2 years ago of just desktop and PCs that ranged up to 12 years old and bring the average age down to 4.9 years. In part due to an adjustment to our replacement schedule to be more realistic and aligned with the city's resources, instead of a 3-year replacement schedule going with a 5-year schedule. So part of what this PO extension does is enable the city to continue that progress, because we're getting close to our objective, right, across our inventory to be at that 5-year mark, which means more and more of the staff is working with current technology that makes their jobs easier and more efficient.
Great, thank you very much.
And Mrs. Miller is helping us out by piggybacking with the County of Ventura to go ahead and continue with this.
Correct. It's a competitively bid agreement that the County of Ventura has with this vendor, CompuWave, and we, as an addition to other agencies, piggyback on that to use those pricing schedules for our purchases.
And I know, Mr. City Manager, we piggyback with quite a few of our contracts with different counties and Riverside for other and other counties for purchases that saves us money in the long run. So.
Yes, and we do verify those prices. We don't just go automatically purchase. We get competitive bids to compare, and CompuWave is consistently the lowest priced vendor.
Great, thank you. Councilman? No? Okay, need a motion on this item? Oh, excuse me, any additional speakers on this item, either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, so looking for a motion.
Mayor Mayor, I know we visited this at the last item. I'm willing to second it, but I see Mr. Bartello still has his hand up. Can we just confirm he doesn't want to speak on this
Mr.
item?
Bartello, either this item or item 8?
Mr. Doug Portello, do you want to speak on this item? Please
Hi.
press.
Can you hear me? No, but thank you very much. I missed my opportunity. I guess I couldn't be unmuted for the item on CFD number 5. I understand it was all voted on already. I would like to speak on D8 if I can possibly be unmuted. I'm glad I got unmuted this time, and thank you for taking that time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll call you number 8 then. So we got a second.
yes.
We got a first by Councilman Sua, second by Turan. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0. And Mayor, for the record, I would just like to state that we did ask Mr. Bartello to unmute on the past 3 items. So we did we did offer him the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, on number 5, we have Finance Department. This is Public Safety Property Tax Assessment for 2023-24. Recommendation that Finance and Governance Committee review and recommend to the City Council the adoption of resolution establishing fiscal year 2023 tax rate on property in the City of Oxnard for payment of voter-approved obligations related to public safety personnel pension expenses. And do we have any speakers on this item, either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, council members, any questions on this item? If not, I'd like to make a motion to. You do?
Well, I was seeing if you had any questions.
Come on. Because I was going to make a motion to.
Well, if I can take 1 second.
To approve, but go ahead.
Thank you. I was hoping we'd just take a moment to just talk a little bit about this item and just briefly explain it for the public, just because I know we're not able to reenact the presentation for Measure M. Do we have someone who can do that?
Go ahead, Sheree.
Yes, I can answer your questions, council member. So basically, this is the standard property tax assessment. We bring this forth each year so that we can put this on the tax roll, and this is covering public safety pensions. And so each year we have to do the recalculation, and in the report we go through the math and explain how it is that we reached the number that is going to be seen on people's property tax assessments.
Specific to this item, correct?
Correct.
Yes, and this was enacted by the voters originally, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Many years ago.
Yeah. Right, no, those are my questions. Thank you for the brief explanation.
So, Madam Clerk?
Chair Zaragoza, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this item.
Second.
Second by Councilman Suas. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. Item 6. This is the Finance Department Annual Delegation of Investment Authority. Recommendation that Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution delegating the investment authority to the City Treasurer for fiscal year 2023-24. And of course, we have Mark for it.
I'm happy to answer questions if you
Any
have questions, Mayor, council members.
This happens every single year.
Yeah, it's
Routine. Okay, you want a motion?
I will motion.
Motion by
Excuse me,
Councilman Sue,
Mayor.
second by
Excuse me, Mayor.
any speakers on this item?
No, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Sue, second by Councilman Turan. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, our next item, again, is Finance Government Committee. This is item number 7. Recommend that City Council authorize a resolution declaring the intent of the city to be reimbursed from the potential bond proceeds for expenditures made towards street and alleyways improvements. Recommendation, the Finance and Governments Committee recommend the City Council approve and authorize a resolution declaring the intent of the city to be reimbursed for certain capital expenditures from the proceeds of indebtedness. And again, we do we have any speakers on this item, virtually or in person?
Chair Zaragoza, we have no speakers virtually. Oh, actually, there's just one more speaker who just called in, Brian Rodriguez.
Okay.
Brian Rodriguez, please press *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Could I speak after the presentation from the consultant, please?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Council members, do we have any questions on this item?
Mayor, we have Christian Sprunger from NHA Advisors, the city's financial advisors, on
That's right, it's
the
a
call,
live-
and he's ready to present to you.
Go ahead, Christian.
Christian, you're on mute.
Are you still on mute? Or?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Good afternoon, committee members, members of the public. My name is Christian Sprunger. I'm an assistant vice president with NHA Advisors. We are the city's municipal financial advisor. I've shared my screen. I hope you all can see it. This afternoon, I'll be speaking to you briefly regarding a reimbursement resolution for street projects. Staff's recommendation on this item is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend to the City Council that they approve and authorize a resolution declaring the intent of the city to be reimbursed for certain capital expenditures from proceeds of tax-exempt indebtedness. To provide a little bit of background, City Council approved the issuance of lease revenue bonds in October 2022 to fund street improvement projects and phases 3 and 4 of the ERP implementation. The timing of this bond issuance is delayed, but in order to avoid delaying the projects, the city plans to use general fund cash reserves to cover the cost of the projects until the bonds can be issued. We're bringing this item before the committee now and the council next because the IRS requires that this resolution be adopted within 60 days of when the first expenses are paid from city's reserves. So adopting this resolution does not obligate the city to issue the bonds down the road, but it simply preserves the option for the city to look back and say, and reimburse itself from tax-exempt bond proceeds for the money that it has put forward from the general fund to keep these projects on schedule. And with that, I'll see if there are any questions.
Any additional information from staff on this item? Mark or Siri? No additional questions?
No, we're happy to answer questions.
Council members? No? Okay, so any
Yes, we have a speaker, but Mr. Sprunger, can you
Rodriguez?
close your screen, please?
Certainly.
Okay, we have Brian Rodriguez. Please press *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just had a question surrounding the use of reserves. And I just hope there could be some discussion surrounding reserves and also the city's credit rating. It's my understanding that we currently have, is it 39 million in general fund reserves and Measure O reserves, it's 14 million. Are those numbers correct? I mean, how much do we have? How much, are we doing all 36 million of the street,
Is that,
the street bonds to be used in reserves?
Mr. City, turn this out part of the agenda, so what,
I believe it is. This is on using reserves to, the resolution to reimburse us from that, correct? And then just to my second part was, how is this going to impact the city's credit rating? I was just kind of curious of that will it impact the city's credit rating at all? How is that kind of forecasted into this proposal from staff and the consultant? So thank you very much.
Can you answer the question,
Yeah, this is, to clarify, this item, Mayor, is related to the bonds that were approved by the council in the fall. So and this is going to be reimbursement for those bonds once issued.
Okay, Mr. Rodriguez? Thank you. So really had nothing to do with this agenda item. So. Go ahead.
As I interpret it, I believe the speaker,
With reserves.
in seeing how we are utilizing reserves for cash funding of our streets in the absence of being able to bond, I believe the question was, how much do we have in reserves and how does this use of our reserves affect our credit rating? Okay. If that's not pertaining to the item, then.
But we'll bring it in the budget under 8.
Thank you for that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what's pleasure?
Chair Zaragoza, there's no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay. Councilman Basua?
So I just want to just maybe clarify, the staff report doesn't show any funds being allocated. So I think that's where the misunderstanding
reserves?
is. Yeah, because we don't know, correct? It's just
Siri, can you,
it's just a way for the city to get reimbursed at some point after
because
we're
we're
all
not
done.
there yet, right?
Correct. This is a resolution that's required under the IRS regulations for when we are able to issue the bonds and when we are getting reimbursed from those bonds. That could happen in a future fiscal year.
It's a placeholder, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
So with that being said, I will move the recommended action.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you.
Yes, and I will second that. And thank you, Mr. Sprunger.
So anyway, I've got a motion by Basua and second by Councilman Turan. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. Our next item is the Financial Department is a proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget. The recommendation that the Finance Committee, Governance Committee, recommend the City Council and Housing Authority Board conduct a public hearing on fiscal year 2023-24 on the proposed budget on June 6, 2023 for the City Council of Oxnard and the Housing Authority and provide staff direction regarding any adjustments to the proposed budget in preparation for the final budget adoption on June 2023. And again, this is a pre-recorded item, and this is per Measure M. And we do have Ashley for any additional questions.
If I may.
Can you give us an update?
Yeah, two things. First, hello, I'm Ashley Gold. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I wanted to provide some context for the discussion this evening. But before I do so, I'd like to invite our Budget Manager, Victor Zambrano, up that's going to go over a few changes that we've had since the printing of your agenda packet. Once he goes over those changes, I'd still like to provide just a few remarks to kind of frame the overall discussion. And then we have our executive team as well as Denise Olson, who is serving as the interim CFO while this was being developed, and we will be here to answer your questions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Victor first, and Diego, if you can get up the slides.
But we do have a speaker on this item.
You can take that speaker while we queue up the slides as well, however you'd like to do that, Mayor.
Okay, we got Mr. Partello.
Mr. Portello, please press star 6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, can I speak after she gives that presentation?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So we'll start the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Budget Manager Victor Zambrano, and I want to call your attention to several items that have occurred
or are occurring since the Finance and Governance Committee staff report was published approximately a week ago. And I'll start with our expenditures. First slide. So as you can see here, there are 10 items on this chart. And although it looks significant, overall it really is not. The cumulative change will not impact our fund balance significantly. It will have a minor impact, but not to a great degree. So going through these individually, we'll start with the expenditure side of the equation. You can see these 4 items that are currently listed. The 3 that you see at the top, those are going to be reflected in the budget book that will be published in a couple of days. That includes special districts, which is $3.1 million increase. And typically, as you heard, the special districts budget is very complicated and is usually delayed. So this reflects the adjustments that are included in their budget. And that's a $3.1 million increase to their expenditures. Most of that is related to professional services, related to anticipated additional projects planned for next year, and also some costs associated with increases in FTEs for special districts. With regards to housing, that also is an increase in expenditures of $117,000. Again, that's a timing issue in getting their budget input into the system, and most of that increase is for operations and maintenance expenses. Fire, we're recommending a $2 million reduction in expenditures from the Capital Growth Fund for station number 4. This will have no impact on the design phase of the project, but the CIP will be deferred to later years as future revenues become available or alternate funding sources. Number 4 actually won't be in the budget book, and it typically is not, but there is a $6.2 million increase for the non-city component of the Housing Authority. And again, we typically get that post the F&G, or at least we did this year, so that it was not included in the original staff report.
Okay.
Moving on to items that will not be in the book for 525, but we eventually will include in the book if council approves. The first one is the police department. We're recommending a $2.7 million reduction in the 23-24 budget for property purchases. As you know, there are plans to purchase property for a new precinct. We originally had budgeted that in the upcoming fiscal year. Since the purchase is going to be made this current year, we're going to extract it from next year's budget so we're not double counting.
Okay.
In addition, we're also going to include $100,000 for ongoing maintenance of that property in the police budget. For special districts, we're recommending an increase to appropriations of $172,000, and this is related to the general benefit increase as was discussed earlier, and that is a general fund impact.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Taranto?
Yes.
Thank you. I just have a quick question about the 2900 Saviors Road item here. Just to clarify, it's coming out of this fiscal year or next fiscal year?
The purchase will, if the purchase happens this year, we'll take it out of this year's budget.
Okay.
Only if it, I see.
Only in this year, yeah.
Okay.
Originally, there were plans to initiate the purchase next year. That was accelerated, so we'll take it out of this year's budget.
Okay. Okay. And forgive me because this is literally off the top of my head, but was it 2.4 or 2.7 million that we were looking at for that?
Originally, we had budgeted 2.7. I believe the new estimated purchase price is 2.4 million.
Okay. Just, okay. That's validating for me, thank you. But I think just so it's clear for the public that if they see that and they see that, wait a minute, that's not the amount it was, well, thank you for that clarification that it's 2.4.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next slide. Again, these are items that are not going to be in the budget book, but will be if approved. This is another adjustment. We had originally budgeted $4 million of general fund monies for the IUF reimbursement for the water program. There is a recommendation to accelerate that payment to the water fund in the current year instead of next year. So originally we had it in the budget, so this will extract it from the budget so we don't have it again in both years.
Oh, so you're gonna accelerate it, is that?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So that payment just specifically for water, the water component of the 9.5 million that was budgeted for the IUF reimbursement, we will accelerate it, reimburse the fund this year as opposed to next year.
Okay.
For environmental resources, there's an item that is going later this evening with the Public Works and Transportation Committee for an increase in appropriations for $811,000, and that's related to agreements for big truck rental and toter. So that will increase their appropriation requirements for next year. And then finally, number 6, there's a CalPERS adjustment that the city is taking advantage of, and it'll be a net benefit to the city of about $400,000. It will increase revenues across all funds by about $1.2 million, and it will also increase expenditures by about $800,000 across all funds for a net gain of $400,000. And then finally, on the revenue side, as we mentioned earlier, we received the special district's post-F&G staff report. In their new budget, they're estimating a $1 million increase to their revenues. And for water, this is just sort of the other side of the equation on the revenue side for the $4 million adjustment for the IUF reimbursement. And then lastly, the $5.2 million increase in revenues, which is related to the recently approved rate increases for water. And that totals approximately $5.2 million. So that will be an increase to water revenues. So overall, total revenues, pluses and minuses, is a net of $1.2 million. So now we're anticipating revenues to go up from 525.2 up to 527.4.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And that's all I have. Any questions?
No, thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. Then we get Ashley. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you for that, Victor. And I know that was a lot of information to go over. I think the important thing to keep in mind with those modifications that he's going over those are all actions that are occurring and typically occur during this time period, and it's not truly affecting a large percentage of the budget overall. So we will work to incorporate those comments into the staff report that will present on your June 6th meeting. And then as Victor indicated, they'll be reflected in the final budget book, provided you take action on those individual items. So back to kind of framing the discussion before you this evening. First, I just want to remind all of us here that we were facing a structural deficit of $9.2 million just 4 years ago. We've been able to work to get out of that withstanding a global pandemic, and thank you to the voters with Measure E, we've been able to have council start to approve restoration budgets starting back in the 21-22 budget. That's allowed us to reinstate programs and services that we previously either eliminated or had to reduce. And so while we continue to make those improvements with the guidance of your strategic priorities that you adopted, we're also facing a lot of exterior factors that we went over to in a lot of depth at your February 7th meetings, but things like supply chain, inflation, labor shortage, and of course the most recent Aaron Star litigation affecting the bonds. That is truly affecting how quickly we can restore services and in some cases start or even complete projects.
I'm sure you're probably going to talk about the item 3, the bonding litigation. That's really going to impact a lot of the bonding for several items. Sir, can you talk some more about that, or you probably haven't gotten there yet?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I was going to stay on since you all listened to my 50-minute plus presentation already, I wasn't going to reenact the entire video,
By
but
the way, just to share, that presentation you made was probably about close to an hour, which is really, really good presentation.
I told you all to get comfy in the beginning. I hope you did. But yes, the bonding litigation, it doesn't only just affect the streets and the ERP, which we've talked about. It affects things like the fire station that you just saw Victor talk about. It affects the aquatic center. It affects seawalls. It affects senior center renovations and the new senior center, which you've all been talking about for at least 10, almost 15 years. So it has a heavy impact. But as it relates to this current budget, it affects how much we can afford to do in 1 year.
And actually, I'm going to stop there because I got a lot of calls on what's happening to Gonzalez Road and how come we're not fixing it and how come we're, behind and so forth. That litigation is a problem right now because of the bonding, correct?
Yes, it is a problem. We do not have enough funds, if you're going to cash fund them, to increase our PCI. We will be maintaining our PCI at 66, which does not meet the council goal, and it's not the recommendation from your public works director either. So it impacts it because diverting cash towards roadways also means that you're diverting cash away from many other services and needs within this community.
And we were looking at potentially in the future for a 70 PCI, but that's going to take us a long time because we're stuck at 66.
Correct.
Yeah. Councilman Tron?
Thank you. And I just hope that you can reiterate that, Ms. Golden, the need for us to cash fund some of these things that otherwise would have been paid for through these bonds does mean that something else in the general fund, if we utilize that fund, is going to have to be reduced in some way. And typically our general fund is our public safety, our recreation, youth and senior services. And I just hope folks understand that that's where we are now. And I think the example I'd used previously was learning all of a sudden that now you have to pay your car off in full when you had a 36-month lease or 36-month payments. And then now, well, how am I going to reduce, what am I going to take away from in my budget? Am I going to take away from groceries? Am I going to take away from utilities, fun stuff? What do I take away from in order to now pay this thing that I was otherwise going to spread out over a long period of time? So thank you for pointing that out.
And the seawalls too, people have been working the seawalls for the longest time, and now we're going to have to wait on that. The senior center is another one that really, really we need our seniors to. They've been asking for the senior center for a long time, but because of litigation, it's stalled, which is really, really horrible.
I think, just pulling back a little bit, I think the other thing I really wanted to mention here, because I do know the video was long, but I want to make sure that the council and the community understand that we're planning for the future. We don't look at this year to year. So I spent a lot of time talking about the 7 financial principles that we need to adhere to and what the benefits of doing and sticking on that course do for the council and the community and getting to that AA bond. And that is a really important element, is adhering to those financial principles. The second part that I wanted to highlight in terms of looking to the future is the sunsetting of Measure O. Council adopted the weaning schedule. We're continuing to recommend following that weaning schedule. And we need to continue to plan for these things in the future to put the city in the best position possible, and to have that not be a $20 million, that's estimated in today's dollars, but to have a $20 million annual cliff in 2028. We are planning for that and we are following that schedule. So in taking into consideration all the external factors that we've already gone over in depth on the presentation, and in looking to the future, what we're recommending to you in the upcoming budget is an ongoing increase of $3 million within the general fund, as well as one-time fees, projects around $12.4 million. Some of that has changed a little bit with what Victor talked about tonight, because we would do some of those purchases in this fiscal year instead of next fiscal year. But roughly $3 million in ongoing cost and $12.4 million in a one-time cost, as well as with Measure O, as I said, completing the weaning schedule for this year, where we would transfer the fire department operations out of the Measure O into the general fund, as well as the homeless operations center. And then again, a series of one-time projects to the tune of over $15 million in Measure O, with the majority of that being due to the bonding litigation. In Measure O, that's $10.5 million alone for Measure O to go towards streets because we were not able to bond for those. So to Councilmember Tron, to your point about other services, we're roughly spending about $20 million in cash recommending you spend $20 million in cash towards the ERP and streets, things that we expected to bond for. So that's a lot of money that could have gone towards other departments and needs within this community, rather that be recreation or police or anything in alignment with those council priorities.
And as far as the winning is concerned, Measure O, you're going to use a lot of one-time monies for alleys and IT contracts. I think 2.3 million for alleys, I think is.
Correct,
one time.
2.3 and then 10.5 for streets.
And then also I think the IT for 1.27 one time, also.
For contract services to help with the labor shortage.
Which is much needed,
Correct.
For cybersecurity and et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Yeah.
So just keeping all those external forces in mind, I do want to end on a high note before I turn it over to all the questions. The budget's positive. Is it what we wish that we were recommending to you and being able to restore at a faster rate and give back to our community what they really need? No, but it's positive, and it's your third positive budget in a row. So like I said, we're not facing any service cuts. We're not facing budget deficits. There is no structural deficit presented, even though you will see expenditures are higher than the revenues for both all funds and general fund. That is not a structural deficit. Those are recommended one-time expenditures. And with that, like I said, we have the executive team here, our budget team, and we have Denise online that we can answer any questions you have.
So one of the things I think that you mentioned in your report was that we are adhering to the financial principles that are really, really important. The maintaining the fund balance, debt capacity, budget flexibility, financial performances, management, cybersecurity, and financial reporting. That's really also going to help us potentially with going to the AA.
AA, correct.
Because I think it's really important. Can you share just a little bit more about that and that adhere to financial principles that are really, really important, that we're following those rules, which are really important,
Right. So in the video, like I said, I spent a lot of time going through that and the 7 principles, but not only are those just good management principles to maintain a fund reserve, to maintain budget flexibility, your debt capacity, investing in cybersecurity, your management, and having clean financial reports at the end of the day. Those things are all highly related to being able to increase your bond ratings, and increasing our bond ratings to a AA would allow us to have more access to financial institutions, typically at a better rate, which in the end saves the community money and opens up new opportunities because you're not spending so much for that financing, opens up opportunities to be able to restore other services or other one-time projects.
And S&P looks at that, Standard & Poor's, as per your presentation. They make sure that we follow that financial principles that are really important.
Correct.
Thank you. Council members, any other questions? If not, okay. Speakers on this item?
Yes, chairs. We have 2 speakers on this item. The first one is Doug Portello. Please press *6 to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Okay. And I'd just like to say I did hear Rose earlier try to ask me to unmute, which I tried several times and didn't work. So thank you, Rose. And I know you tried a few times, so thank you for that. I would like to just ask for the unfunded pension liability, what is being budgeted annually and the projection for paying that down? So for the current year and for the next 5 years or 7 years, I'd like to know what's being budgeted to help pay that down, and what is the debt service annually for the unfunded pension liability. Now, there was some comments made about the Iron Star lawsuit and that's stopping a lot of capital improvement projects and other things. It's not stopping anything. You are choosing to bond out over $506 million when Oxnard's already number 8 on the list at financial risk for not being able to pay your bills. So what's happening here is you just have an addiction to overspending, is what it is. This is the reality, that you're biting off more than you can choose. James Aragon ran for city treasurer, and he said it very clearly, and it was just really well put. You've got 5 major things that you want to do. So you make your priorities for those things. And everything else, if you want an aquatic center, you want a fire station, whatever you else want, then put it before the voters. Make it a measure before the voters. And then they will let you know if they really want that fire station in South Oxnard, if they really want that aquatic center. But to bond out $60 million for a single recreational venue with interest is going to be $100 million. Then you talk about the senior center and the homeless center and the roads. I really want to know, where is all the $50 million a year from Measure E and the $20 million a year until March of 2029 from Measure O? All those promises that were made to fix the roads, enhance senior services, enhance youth
30
services,
seconds.
increase 911 response time. Where is all the miracles of that money going when you're just kicking the can down the road and bonding out far more? And it's not good, sound financial principles, I can tell you that. And what the city's doing, it's dangerous, and we're going to pay a big price for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Brian Rodriguez. Please press star 6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Brian?
Hello. First off, thank you to Councilwoman Basua and Councilmember Gabe Taran for kind of seeing where I was getting at, or what I was getting at during the previous item. I appreciate your comments and kind of the clarification. With regards to this agenda item, I really want to say thank you to staff for just how comprehensive it was. You know, I really appreciated just the data that was kind of mentioned, and you know, comparing some of our numbers with, you know, state numbers. I thought that was really helpful. And also just kind of going back to the council alignment and kind of constantly referencing that. And just there was a heavy emphasis on, you know, the financial principles. And I found that really fascinating and interesting. So thank you for that. And Councilmember Teran actually answered one of my questions earlier. I did have a question about that 2.7 number, but I'm glad to see that it'll be fixed to 2.4. I read somewhere that, you know, our staff vacancies were at 9.25, and I just want to kind of uplift that and kind of mention that because I found that really interesting, and just to see that it rose from 6% last year to 9%. So that was interesting. And during the presentation, it was mentioned that we would need to spend $29.5 million for a PCI of 70. I was just curious how much money we would have to spend to get to at least a 67 PCI, just because we've been making quite pretty steady progress on, you know, our street improvements. And I know it's not really recommended to spend any higher than the 20 million we're already projecting, but I was just curious how much it would cost to, you know, at least try and get to 67. And I only did have one kind of critique of the presentation. I find the slideshow, or the slide presentation, the kind of roadmap, I think it's slide 6. I think it's gotten to the point where it's just a bit distracting. You know, in the beginning, I found it really helpful, and it is kind of helpful to kind of see where we've gone and where we've been. But just the dynamite, you know, portion of it, I don't know. I mean, it is helpful, but just maybe if it could be separated out to kind of the past and then where we are. I don't know. I found that to be a bit distracting. But the last thing is just with regards to the upcoming meetings. I was just wondering if there was any community involvement with regards to this that's going to go on.
30 seconds.
They did a feedback form for residents, and they got about 200, a little over 200 responses. So I was wondering if there was going to be kind of a form sent out. I think it might be interesting to kind of see whether or not residents are supportive of some of the direction, and just to kind of get that perspective might be really interesting. And if not this year, maybe next year that could be included. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and once again, great presentation and report.
Thank you. So we had a couple of questions here. The unfunded liability was number one, and then the PCI going from 66 to 67 cost, if any. You want to go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Mark Sill, interim CFO. I'm happy to answer the question on the pensions.
Yes.
So currently the unfunded liability is broken down into annual minimum payments that we must pay. The amount for next fiscal year is about $25 million.
25.
And that grows to about $45 million by 2030. So I have a chart that no one can see on my computer, but it's a pretty steep line. So that's going to be a continuing challenge that grows every single year with no real relief within the next 15-year timeframe. So that's going to be a big cost.
And Mark, we're not unique. Most cities are in that
Absolutely
predicament.
not. The largest contributing factor to the unfunded liability is the investment returns from CalPERS, which every city is impacted by.
Thank you so much. And also the question was, what's the cost if it go from 66 to 67 in the PCI? Or do we have that information?
Good evening again, Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works. That's not a lineal question. If you noticed in the presentation, the payment curve is actually exponential. So we'd have to actually go back and do an analysis for that. But for the most part, the way this would work is in the presentation, we talk about $19.6 million is what we would need from a hard construction cost to maintain our current PCI. Again, want to make sure that is noted that excludes the soft cost. And in order to reach a PCI of 70, again, in current fiscal year dollars, we would need close to $30 million. For ease of conversation, you can draw a linear line between those and extract out what it would cost to go to 67, 68, 69, 70. So you could do that, but recognize that that's a simplification of a very complex exponential curve. But that would be the answer to that. It's roughly in between $20 million and $30 million increments of a couple $1 million for each PCI point.
Thank you so much. Any additional questions on the budget?
Yes, Mr. Wolf, just along those lines, looking at what we are able to do in the coming fiscal year as proposed in this budget regarding streets and alleys, I know that it's going to be limited in scale compared to what we would like to do and what we had projected to do. But speaking to alleys specifically, because there are a number of neighborhoods in District 2 and in other districts that still have alleys that have low PCIs, we'd originally told the residents that many of the alleys were going to be reconstructed using concrete. And so I'm hoping that we can just talk a little bit about that. Are we looking at resurfacing with asphalt, or is that still the plan to do concrete with those alleys?
Currently, the plan is to continue to use concrete for alleyways for lots of different reasons. One of which would be the type of loading that happens in the alleys. Solid waste trucks, for the most part, are very heavy pieces of equipment, and concrete typically does it much better in terms of longevity for those. Also, alleyways tend to be a very significant spot for collection of stormwater. So again, water and asphalt are typically mortal enemies of each other. Concrete is a much better in terms of water conveyance as well. So we're proposing to do all those alleys as funding allows to do those in concrete.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, even though it's smaller in scale than we would like to or that we'd planned to, given the current situation with bonding litigation, I do appreciate that we're going to stay the course with that with the concrete alleys. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, any additional speakers on this item, either virtually or in person?
Chair Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, just me. I want to quickly respond to Mr. Patello's speaking points. So first of all, the Measure E and Measure O, where's that money gone? It's evidenced in the budget. So if you look at the budgets and compare them to the prior years, it's very clear. And I think that most people who have their eyes opened and recognize all the work that's going on across the city, be it street paving, tree trimming, landscaping, cast iron pipe replacement, and so on. I think it's obvious to most people who are rational that it's occurring. It is slower than we'd expect and hope for, but it is occurring. With regard to the bonding litigation, absolutely that slows us down. Bonding is a tool that local governments use. Right? It is impossible for any municipality, county, or even the state of California to cash pay for everything as you go. It does not work like a single household budget. It is not simplistic, it is not linear, it is not like a single household budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I did have one question for Ms. Golden, if we can just have this on the record. And I believe you stated it during the presentation as well, but when we look at the slides of revenues versus expenditures, just what appears to be a deficit, in what we're spending versus what we're bringing in. Can you just speak to that for folks who may be watching this?
Yes, so that is not a structural deficit. The difference of the anticipated revenues versus the expenditures, the 219 million to the 231, those are the one-time expenditures that were explained earlier in the slide, that they were approximately 2.5 million. With Victor's changes, those will go down a little bit, but those are one-time. It's not ongoing operation costs or personnel. We're not back to the man in the hole 4 years ago.
Great, thank you. And just real quickly regarding the city manager's comment, I know I understand the thought process and not comparing a municipality to a single household budget, but I'm going to do it anyways. But I just want to say, to say that not financing a large project or a large purchase, I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, but if I go ask a financial advisor, should I purchase my house cash or should I finance that over the course of 15 or 30 years based on my revenue that I have coming in every month or every year? I would imagine a financial advisor would tell me, well, based on what you make, realistically, you should do this. Otherwise, you can save that cash for 30 years and then buy that home. And how much will it cost in 30 years if you save your cash? Will you ever catch up to that? So I just wanted to throw that out there to say that it's fiscally irresponsible to be bonding capital projects out, that the community has spoken on a number of them and that this council has seen as priorities for a number of years. It seems the inverse to me, where it's be more fiscally responsible for us to essentially finance those over the long period of time and spread that cost out over multiple generations versus everybody paying for it now, as long as and then we take away from today's police, today's fire department, today's rec programs, today's senior services. So anyways, I appreciate what the city manager said. It does make sense to me, but I just wanted to throw that analogy out there anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. And again, this is, we're going to recommend this to the city council, and, where are we on this project, on this budget? Where should we go and where are we forced to go? I think it's really important information here, and I just want to thank staff for excellent work they've done so far, and we're recommending this to the city council, and we need a motion this item.
I'll move the recommended action.
And seconded by Councilman Sua. Please vote. And thank you again for excellent work, giving us a lot of work.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. And I think we're probably about 30 minutes ahead of into the other committee, so we're going to probably start in the next 5 minutes or so. Thank you. We are adjourned on this item.